What I want to talk about today is kind of a component of Holtec's proposals for what to do with the site. And it seems like a small component, but it actually kind of reveals a lot about the company itself, what their plans are, what their goals are, and how much of a grift is currently being waged against us. So for those who don't know, what Holtec has proposed is they are developing these SMRs, small modular reactors. They have a 160, which is say a 160 megawatt model, and a 300 megawatt model. They are proposing to place these smaller footprint reactors inside the vessels at Indian Point, or simply building new vessels to support them. What you need to know about these reactors is that they don't exist yet. The technology, Tina mentioned unproven technology, they haven't been deployed yet successfully anywhere. There are some under construction. There are plans to install, I think they just signed a plan with a couple of towns in the UK to deploy multiple SMR 300s in there. That is on a 5 to 10 year timeline. There's no real serious discussion of the technology or the infrastructure there yet. And all around the United States, where they have purchased decommissioned sites, they are proposing putting in these 160 and 300 megawatt reactors. Again, usually they're paired with a solar array or a more traditional form of fossil fuel power to kind of augment what's going on. The other thing that they're proposing in many of these sites, and especially right here, is the addition of a data center. Now, for those of you who don't know, a data center is basically a large warehouse full of computer servers in racks using specialized chips that run traditionally web services and other cloud computing, but more recently, the hyperscale centers are running AI applications. So what happens is a company comes in, they build a data center, they fill it with tens of thousands of specialized computer chips and other equipment, and then they rent those services to other companies as tenants. The largest capital expenditures being made in the United States and in many parts of the world right now is on hyperscale data centers. So, if you are a company and you are looking to start an investor rush for, let's say, a public offering to take your company public, one of the things you're going to want to put out there is like, hey, we're in the data center business. So that is what they are doing. Holtec is trying to launch an IPO this year. That is their first and only priority. That means that they need to get their financials in order and they need to attract investor attention. So they are signing deals and making proposals, dozens and dozens of sites all over the world, and it's always a nuclear power site combined with a data center or other like bait to bring in investors and a lot of times capital investment from municipalities and from states and governments. So let's talk about what they have specifically, that sets the groundwork. Like, this is the type of company we're dealing with. They are interested in collecting investor money. Whether or not they actually have the revenue to justify that investor money, that remains to be seen. I don't want to get too much into the economics of it. Okay, so what they proposed for Indian Point. In their promotional material to potential investors and to towns and to the state, and in their requests to regulators, they have proposed a 250 megawatt hyperscale data center about kitty corner to the cemetery in Verplank, right next to the entrance to the old gypsum plant. It is probably about 900,000 square feet. It is a monster. And I have to tell you, regardless of what else is going on, whether they are serious about this plan, whether they pair it with a nuclear reactor, we should be opposing this installation.
Yes.
We have lots of evidence from all around the country that if you put a data center of this magnitude into a residential area, you're going to be dealing with some knock-on effects that are just deleterious to the people who live there. But let me go through some of them. So let's first talk about the obvious quality of life issue, noise. So inside a hyperscale data center, the server rooms can reach a volume of around 96 decibels. That is enough to cause Hearing loss if you are not wearing ear protection. There's actually lots of OSHA regulations and a lot of workplace safety issues surrounding data centers right now because it's not really well understood exactly how debilitating this can be. I've heard some people compare it to sailors working on the deck of an aircraft carrier. Like they have long-lasting deleterious effects just from the noise. So outside the data center, that noise, not at that decibel level, but that noise can be heard hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of feet away into any residential areas that happen to be in the area. And that is a sustained, loud, rattling hum during normal operations, and it never, ever stops. It is a permanent feature of the landscape as long as those machines are turned on. That's just the racks and the HVAC systems themselves making that noise. So people in the area of data centers, just the ones that exist already, they have reported hearing loss, vertigo, lack of sleep, hypertension, high anxiety, because it's not like a block party where you have a noise ordinance that says no, if you have a certain noise in the neighborhood, the cops have to shut it down. That's for like block parties, that's for like construction. That is a temporary noise ordinance violation. This is a permanent noise that never stops, and it can have long-lasting health effects. I don't want to get too much into there's a lot of people who are concerned about data centers using up water and using up power. The water side of things, usually the water usage is a component of the power usage. If you're putting a 250 megawatt drain on the grid has to supply that much more power, and any method you use to make power requires water. So a lot of times when people talk about data centers using so much water, they're using so much water because they have to draw so much power. It's not actually using a lot of water on site, but that it can be a concern if they're hooked up to, say, city water or other city infrastructure. Again, we're at the very early stages of this proposal. We don't know how serious it is. We don't know what their design is. We don't know how they're going to interact with the infrastructure. But here's where it gets hairy. They're proposing a 250 megawatt facility. They are proposing a 300 megawatt reactor. That reactor is not going to be active anytime soon, at least 6 years. It is just not going to get built. The technology doesn't exist yet, hasn't been approved yet. Even with a friendly NRC, this is a brand new facility. They know that. Data centers, in order to make the window of opportunity that they have to cash in on data center development, they need to have these things online in 4 years or less. Which means they're going to have a 250 megawatt power draw at that site. There are only two places to get that. One is the grid. They have applied for a permit to draw 250 megawatts from the grid. New York might not give them that. If they can't get it from the grid, they need to generate it themselves. And what is directly underneath the outline that they have posted on their website, the Algonquin natural gas transmission line. Now, I don't know if they even know it's there. Some people are that stupid, they don't know that it's on their property. If you've ever lived with an easement, you know, oh, that's right, I've got a thing there. It happens. Some of the people at any point did not know the power, the pipe was there. But here's the thing, we have talked about a lot replacing Indian Point with another power source because it's a node on the grid, there needs to be power there. We have talked about putting in a peaker plant, which is a short-term natural gas power plant that runs during certain hours to augment the grid. It would not be outside the realm of possibility that if they needed to get an additional 250 megawatts of power at the site, that they could apply to tie into a natural gas feed. They could apply for a distribution line, they could get it off of the valves at either ends of the site, and they could run their data center off natural gas. Now, if that happens, that is super loud and super inefficient and super polluting. We're talking about, so in other parts of the country, what has often happened is that if they cannot get the permits, or there's not enough grid capacity to run a data center, and they need to build fast, they'll bring in some semi-portable industrial single-cycle gas turbines, and they'll just run them continuously, even though that's not what they're supposed to do with those. At some point, regulators might decide to crack down on that, but that has happened in other communities where they just get, I think 200 megawatts is like the upper limit of the single cycles, so they probably have 3 plants, so they can run 2 concurrently and then leave the other one off and then swap out. I am pontificating here. The point is, right now they're asking for power. They're not promising to provide it, they're asking for power. If they can't get it for the grid, the next logical step is to get it from the gas. So the practical upshot of this is that we need to make sure that they know right away we oppose this. Because this is kind of giving the whole game away. They need investor money, and they think they can get it by promising these outrageous developments, this outrageous capital expenditure. We have to make it as hard as possible, and we have to make sure they know it is not going to work. So we need our elected officials to step up and say, nope, we're not doing this. We need people to contact Holtec and let her know, data center moratorium if necessary. This is a scam. Don't pair these things two together. They're not going to be built at the same time, and they're absolutely, I think what is going to happen is, if the bottom falls out of the data center market, and they've already started construction, you're going to be left with a rotting hulk full of conduits stripped of all their copper, and if you have any hope of ever seeing this land back in the hands of the town again, it's just going to be a wreck. So in the same way that they're going to leave us holding the bag with the nuclear fuel, Holtec's entire business model is draining the decommissioning fund and charging the government for the storage of the fuel. That's their revenue stream. When that's no longer profitable for them, they will bail at their earliest opportunity. Similarly, if their CapEx expenditure doesn't come through, if they can't finance these facilities that they want to build, then they'll just leave them as wrecks on the ground, and we'll be left holding the bag. So absolutely get out there, make your voice known, talk to your electeds, and let's put a stop to these things before they're born.
Thank you. I have a promotion.